Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. This is the Clutter Fairy Weekly for June 28th, 2022. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, certified professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. The Clutter Fairy Weekly is the webcast and podcast that digs deep into the clutter that piles up between you and the life you want to be living. We explore the habits and behaviors that lead to clutter, and we suggest strategies to slow the accumulation, reduce the collection, and comfortably manage the stuff we decide to keep.
If you're new to our Zoom meeting, we want to let you know that you can share your questions and comments via the chat feature, and I'll try to make sure Gayle addresses them before we move on to another topic. You can also use the raised hand feature to let us know that you'd like to ask a question or make a comment yourself via audio or video. We're also streaming the webcast live on Facebook, so you can share your questions and comments there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. Usually at this point, we rehash last week's Tittle, but last week's Tittle was a rehash of the previous week. We still want to hear from you if you experimented with Marie Kondo method on a new area or collection of items this week. So please share that in the chat, and we'll also be happy to let you speak up. So, but we want to get right back to our topic that was under discussion, and where we left off last week. The last quotation we were discussing was selection criteria. Does it spark joy? The criterion is whether or not it gives you a thrill of pleasure when you touch it. I'm not going to read that whole quotation because we'd started to discuss this, but there were people who indicated that they were still interested in talking about this. So we're going to return to the question. Please explain any problems or challenges the sparking joy criterion presented for you. And one of our commenters on the survey said, sparking joy worked for some items, but not others. I'll downsize soon and know my kitchen will be smaller. My mini muffin tins give me great joy, but I only use them for one recipe. So I got rid of both the tins and the recipe. Sparking joy needs to work in conjunction with the available space. Go ahead, Catherine.
Sparking joy. I have been cleaning out my grove of buckthorn. And every time I have a view, which I have a great, beautiful view in Minnesota of hills, and every time I clear an area so I can see further and enjoy the view, that sparks joy.
Well, and that's like a never-ending project, right? Like if you're clearing out the growth in the backyard, you can be doing that forever, and having that feeling of accomplishment and getting to the end result of a clearer space. That's great. And now you can just translate that to the inside of the house. That process.
Yes, thank you. And I am so inspired by you and your co-host. You guys motivate me every week. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate it. That's kind of you.
Thank you, Catherine. Susan, you were the last person who was ready to talk to us last week on this very question. So please go ahead.
Right. So I'd like to make a few points. One thing, sometimes sparking joy just doesn't lend itself for me to certain things. Like one of the things I get cluttered with in a way is having to make appointments or phone calls, which I avoid, to like doctor's offices and PSENG and utilities and all that. So, but I will say, after the fact, I feel like I was sparked with joy. Okay, so
right, the accomplishment, you mean, checking it off the to-do list?
Yeah, it's done finally.
Yeah.
And I tend to do a batch of them at once, so maybe 2 or 3 at once, and I just go from one to the other. I just do it. So, but I also wanted to make a few comments about the Marie Kondo method. I like a lot of techniques. My opinion is there isn't one way that fits everything. Okay, that you need to declutter, that you need to look at. I view it kind of like a carpenter has a toolbox, and he's got screwdrivers and he's got hammers and other items in there. And I find it is one more tool that I can pull out when appropriate for the task and use. So one of the things I think is refreshing about approaching some things with sparking joy is that prior to reading Marie Kondo's book, I approached clutter like, what can I get rid of? You know, or I need to get rid of something, like, what can I get rid of? Like, this is just horrible in here. That whereas now I'm more positive based, I'm more thinking, what do I want to keep? What do I really like and I'm really using and it still fits me, or, you know, it still has a function in my life. So I just like that paradigm philosophical shift, you know, in how I'm approaching. I just think approaching it positively made a big difference for me. Okay. So
I think that's a really very valid point, in that we do think of decluttering as conquering something that's negative or dealing with something that's negatively impacting our lives, and just coming at it from a point of view of how can I be looking for a positive result and being focused in a more positive way. It changes how you experience it, and it makes it sometimes easier to face, or it makes it less onerous to do. It's not so painful. You don't feel like you're suffering as much. And it does change how you see it, right? That's a very, very good point to make.
definitely.
That she comes at it from, how can I look at this clutter in a positive way?
Yeah.
I'm looking for the things that make me happy. And that is a focus difference.
Right. It also reminds me of, you know, when professional designers talk about restaging a room. So usually one of the things they do is they clear everything out of the room. I mean, even the clutter, but also like the big pieces, the things you need. Let's say it's a living room. All right. So you need a couch or some, you know, comfortable chairs. And then they examine the space and they slowly bring back usually primary pieces, you know, and they pose them and they find, you know, how do they like it working in this space, and they may rearrange. And usually they never bring everything back in because they get to a point where they really like it in a new design.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I kind of like that idea of, you know, wiping the slate clean and just bringing forth what is working and what you like, what, you know. It doesn't apply to everything. I mean, obviously, you know, toilet cleaning brushes, like certain stuff like that. You know.
But, you know, somebody reframed that last week, and they said, you know, nobody likes a toilet brush or things that sparks joy, but I certainly do want to be able to clean it clean the toilet with the brush instead of my hands. And so there is some joy in not cleaning the toilet with your hands and having a brush instead. Like you can spin anything in a more positive way, right?
Correct.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So much.
Thank you, Susan. Naomi shared a great comment, and this really touches on something that I thought we hadn't made it to yet last week in the discussion of sparking joy. Naomi said, joy is a complicated experience. Some people have a more profound problem than how to organize. It's of how they relate to their own emotions and how they interpret their emotions. People can experience insecurity and anxiety and interpret the reaction to stuff as if it were positive excitement. Well, and what we touched on a little bit was, there are people who are so emotionally cued by all their stuff, that sparking joy is not a useful criterion because there's too much.
Right. Yeah.
Meets that. And if everything you handle sparks joy, you're going to have a big clutter problem. And then I also mentioned people for whom, you know, from time to time or even chronically, nothing sparks joy. There are things you need, there are things that are useful, there are things that you have to do your job, but none of them spark joy. Or that I don't want to even limit us to discussing spark joy, because as we talked about before, there are a lot of ways to translate the Japanese expression that Marie Kondo was using. And so a feeling in your heart, a flutter in your heart, a positive emotional response of some kind. I think there are people who don't always have that available and still need a practical way to decide what to keep.
Well, and I guess that if they are not feeling positive and they are not feeling like anything sparks joy, or they're having spark joy overload because everything to them is, it's easily, they can see the beauty in all things. If that's where they're coming from, then it's two extremes where sparking joy isn't exactly a good filter. But then you can shift to something that's less about the joy and more about how it functions, whether it's functional for you or not. And at the very least, even if you are not comfortable with how you feel about it, or you feel overwhelmed with how much of it feels appealing, you can ask yourself, and I have to say this with creative people a lot, because creative people think everything is cool and is useful and serves a function. But you can ask yourself, is this functioning for me in my life right now? Does it support something that I'm doing right now? Is it part of the tasks that I'm responsible for, the people that I'm responsible for, my job responsibilities, my family responsibilities? Does it support something that's happening right now? And let that be a criteria that helps you function. And if it doesn't support something that you're responsible for or doing or interacting with right now, then maybe it's, maybe it's time for it to go out the door. So we got two hands up. So let's start with Michelle in UK.
Yeah, I have a real problem with the sparking joy, because I don't know if I don't have the same level of attachment to things. But I kind of wander around thinking, I kind of like that. I kind of, and if I stripped it all out, the whole place would look completely stark. But I don't get it. I thought, right, I don't think I get KonMari at all. And especially for getting stuff out. But over the weekend, I thought, right, I'm going to do my homework. So I didn't pull the entire lingerie drawer out and empty it. I just pulled out the drawer, stuck it on the bed, and had a good look at it and tried every bra I own on. I counted them.
That must have been fun.
I owned 30.
Oh my gosh.
Every single one on. And there was only one that I thought, yep. There was one that I had any sort of reaction, but a woman can't exist with just one.
No, you got to have more than one. I
contented myself with binning 12.
Hey, you cut it in half almost. That's great.
But I just couldn't get any sort of response, and for knickknacks and what have you, I just don't get an emotional response from them.
Well, that's kind of, consider yourself lucky. Lots of people do get a big emotional response from their stuff, and they feel greatly burdened and troubled by that. And so maybe you can just say, hey, I'm lucky because I'm not super attached to everything, and I'm not really, worried about it. And it makes it easier for you to decide to take 12 bras and throw them out. Right?
With the knickknacks, I especially upstairs in my study, I wanted to thin them out.
Yeah.
But I can't make decisions about them because I don't know. My husband's on one end of the scale. My husband's going to get back from his business trip and find nothing left in the house because I have no attachment to anything. And he'll just think I've lost my mind.
Well, maybe you can go for 75% out the door and leave a little bit so he's not completely surprised when you come home. When he comes home. Thanks for sharing, Michelle. I appreciate that. And I know that other people can relate.
Before we go on to Maida, let me read a comment from Gabrielle.
Okay.
Which is a little bit of a counterpoint to Michelle. Gabrielle said, what I like about the Spark Joy method is that it is not a vast catalog of questions about usefulness, but it appeals to my emotional center.
Okay. So it works for you as a barometer. And that's great. As long that's, I mean, that's the goal, right? It's supposed to be helpful. So if that's a barometer that works for you, awesome. Thank
Go ahead,
you.
Maida.
Oh, what I was going to say about sparking joy. I sort of have learned to do this now in like little chunks. So like right now, I had a event, I needed a sundress. I pulled all my sundresses out, and then I chose the ones that I would wear at that moment. And that was sort of like the sparking joy of like what works now. It's not like each individual piece means all that much, but kind of what works in the moment. But like, I can't do sweaters right now. I got to do like what would work like today. And that's like a real test to me, because there's stuff I love, but it's like, if you're not going to wear it today, then
when are you going to wear it? Right. Like, what's the point?
Yeah. So that's why, and I hang things up. I never make that. Well, I have made that pile. I got a pile up there now that I can't get to because I hurt my back. So I don't make piles that make a mess. So I just use like one of those folding racks, and I'll just pull out maybe like, you know, a couple of chunks of hangers at a time and just do it that way. I don't like that big pile method she does either.
Right. Yeah. But you are taking the lesson of the big pile, which is I need a sundress today. Therefore, I'm looking at 100% of my sundresses and making my priority judgments among the sundresses. These are the ones that I would wear right now, and these I would not wear now. And so you are using that thought process of looking at 100% of what you have in that one category and making your judgments. And then it allows you to let some stuff go. And that's the goal, right? That's the ultimate, like, I need space in my closet. This is how I'm going to get there. And so, you know, maybe you're going to do shorts and t-shirts this summer because it's summer and we know you're going to put them on. And so you can end up going through more categories, and that closet will keep getting thinner. And that's excellent. Thank you.
Let me share a comment from Barbara before we go on to Marshmallow.
Okay.
Barbara says, I'm in the midst of sorting and organizing photos. Obviously, I'm going to keep the few photos that spark joy, but there are thousands of photos, and I intend to keep several hundred at least. Not every birthday photo, but yes, at least 1 or 2 per year, just to show how my children changed from year to year. And I am keeping the entire series of other events. I want to be able to evoke these memories as I age. So there's a certain element there in Barbara's approach to photos is I expect this to spark joy in the future.
Oh, right.
You know,
like she can anticipate that it'll be special to her later.
Go ahead, Marshmallow.
I got sidetracked with the kitty cat. So, hi all, thank you. And I've been working through the joy part of this. Found out that my procrastination with clearing my clutter is my very, 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 very weak attempt to release the stress. And I work with PTSD. This is not self-care for me now. And what I like about her piling is that I can pull it all out, everybody. And I'm injured. I'm deeply, deeply injured from my childhood. And I've come to terms with that, working with Gayle and Clutter and all of you and some of the other websites, that this piling is the start for me. It's powerful. It's like torture. On the other hand, though, what I've got to release just in the last 2 weeks is that I am finding out that my vulnerability as the piles are in my life is where I saved myself as a child. So I get to move these piles up, and I look at them and I go, oh, I'm not happy. I'm not happy here at all. That all goes in the paper bag. And I just wanted to say that I've started to go ninja on my clutter and this procrastination. It may be my weakest point, but all of you, it's become a very powerful place where the things I've got left now, I look over and I just start to giggle, everybody. I just start to, because I found it, even if it was in the bottom of the pile or the bottom of the closet now. So
you found things that you appreciate and love and have them in your life.
Right. And I don't have to go and buy them, and I don't have to replace it. And I mean, this is a profound injury that I'm dealing with, and the clutter represents it in my face. with you all, the Clutter Fairy, and her piling has become a really good avenue for success. And I thank you all.
That's awesome. Great. Yeah, there is something about moving clutter around and starting to unbuild piles that have been there for a long time that starts to change things and move energy around, because they're usually representation of avoided things when it's a big stack. And so you do start having to look at things as you destroy an old and stale pile.
Thank you.
And thanks for sharing. We appreciate it. Glad you're here.
Thanks, Marshmallow. Okay, let's go on, Gayle, to the next question in our survey.
If you modified or adapted the KonMari method to add other criteria besides sparking joy, or to reinterpret the criteria by which you decided what to keep, please share the approach you took.
Here's a good one, good answer to the survey. Looking at how long I have had items but not used them. Examining books for ones that sounded like I would like them, but when I perused them, I found they were not for me. Having moved several times, I ask, is this worth the weight of me moving it? That's a really important one. Noticing my instinct to get rid of something. As for acquiring, waiting until I have an actual need for something, then waiting and seeing if it is an ongoing need, then doing a lot of thinking and shopping to find the best item for me.
A lot about function and need at that point.
Yeah. Deborah mentioned the container concept from A Slob Comes Clean can work too. I keep my favorites of each category as long as it fits, tidy it away, and there's a space for it. This ties in with the KonMari method. Keep your favorites and let everything else go.
And then have that favorite be that what Deborah's adding is that having that favorite collection be in their own container so that you know the limits, the parameters of what you have room to keep. I think that is always a big help. And of course, that container, we've talked about that container method all over the place. It particularly works well with paper and other things that you have a propensity to keep more of. I'm thinking particularly of, oh, here's the stuffed animals, or here's the frogs that I've been collecting, or here's the precious memories I've been collecting. And when they start to outstrip your display case or your cabinet or the places that you have designated to show these things off, when they don't fit anymore, then it's time you've reached the parameters and it's time to start making some value judgments about, I like this one better than that one. And so this one, the one that I don't like as much, can go to make room for one that I like better. And it's a way to set some parameters around how much you keep and how much space you surrender to a collection of something that you adore. Okay.
Roberta, who's with us on Facebook, said, over the years, I have read books and watched videos. Some tried to motivate with guilt and shame. Two earlier helps came from Julie Morgenstern and Don Aslett, who used humor along with helpful advice. From the KonMari method, I took away folding my shirts up so they stand to better see each one. She also says that she really appreciates us and our videos. So thank you for that, Roberta.
Thank you for that. And the folding shirt one really is probably the most famous. Like that's the one that everybody liked, was the folding the shirts and standing things up like a little row in the shirt in the drawer. That one seems, if you don't like anything else about KonMari, you probably do some version of folding things up and standing them up in a line in the drawer. And that one really appealed to everybody.
Well, almost everybody, because a few people on the survey said they weren't happy with that because they felt like things ended up with too many wrinkles, and crushed and musty were words that were used.
Well, yeah, there's a downside to everything, right?
Gabrielle, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, crushed and musty also says to me that it's going in there and not coming out often enough. If it's in there long enough to feel musty or to get really crushed out, really get permanently wrinkled, it's probably hasn't been circulating enough to come in and out.
Well, if it's crushed, there's probably too
many of them
in there.
right?
Yeah.
There's too many.
You've kept too many.
You kept too
Gabrielle
many.
said, what I dislike about Kondo is her approach of taking out everything to a big pile, 100% chance to feel overwhelmed. I suppose she uses this concept because she works with clients on a one-to-one basis. That would definitely be easier to deal with if you felt like you had a strong ally there to help you get through it. Gabrielle says, for me, as a person who works on her own, this is not a solution. I always work on little boxes.
This is the place where most people get hung up, is the idea of looking at 100% of like all the books in the house or all the clothes in the house. It makes such a big pile, and it makes so many hours of work to go through it all that a lot of people find that they don't have that kind of stamina. They don't have that kind of time. They don't have that kind of focus. Like they could spend a week going through all the clothes in their closets and basically have to take a vacation to address 100% of the clothing they have in the house. So it works if you have more than one person, if you have the stamina to go 8 or 10 hours in a day, and if you have an easy decision making, like you can pull it out and make decisions quickly and make your discards quickly. And I think otherwise it's really overwhelming to people, and you're not the only person to make that comment. I think it is, given the volume that we generally have in our houses, particularly in the United States, I think it's always a shocker to do that. And when I go and work with somebody, again, it's the same thing. I'm there one-on-one and there's two of us, and I'm going to pull out all of something, but I'm not going to pull out the whole closet because I know I can't get it done in 3 hours. So it requires a commitment of time and focus and decision making that a lot of people find too big of an ask for their own personal resources. Miss Deborah has a hand up.
I do. I think your point about quantity is very valid, because Marie Kondo comes from Japan, famous place of small spaces. And I currently live in Vienna, Austria, small flats. And therefore, pulling something out of one category works in a small space because you already can't have too much.
Right. And you're forced by the container.
You're forced by the container. You simply would never be able to function, do your job, if you had mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains of stuff. And so I think that this is a uniquely American problem and partially a Canadian problem, but maybe a bit less so than American. Less consumerism is part of that. I'm not saying Japan or Austria are not consumerist societies, but when one is constrained by a physical space, you're forced into these decisions. You are forced, otherwise you live like a complete hoarder slob. One family that I helped over many, many sessions declutter their place, and I'm still digging into their paperwork, which I can't wait to get into. But I've said to, and both are American, living here, and I said, in the US or in Canada, you would look like minimalists, but in our small flats, you look
because
like
of the space.
Because of the space. So I think that's a translation, not a literal language translation, but a cultural translation problem. If it's true that the American home typically has 300,000 items, according to the Story of Stuff, then of course it's going to be too much to pull out.
Then 4,000 of them are clothes, and like nobody can face that.
And so,
and it's so typical of my clients to have
work.
So many of my clients have, one girl, there's a couple and kids, and one woman has taken over the master closet and 3 other closets in the house with their clothes. And that's super typical.
Gayle, let's go on to our next quotation, which provoked some very strong responses.
Okay, cool. So here's 7. The quote that he pulled out was, "Clutter is caused by a failure to return things to where they belong." Therefore, storage should reduce the effort needed to put things away, not the effort needed to get them out.
Quite a few people said, I don't understand that. I don't know how to make sense of that. How could something be easy to get out and not also easy to put away? What is your thinking on that? I found that puzzling myself.
So I have this, I have this conversation with clients a lot in the kitchen, in the cabinet. I'm looking at a cabinet and I'm wanting to put in, here's the pots and pans that they're going to use. And in an effort to not have to give away as much, the clients want me to stack them up. Here we're going to put all these frying pans and there's 6 in a tower, and we're going to wedge all these things into this cabinet, and then I can keep them all. And my first thought is, okay, so as long as no one ever cooks again, this is going to work. But as soon as you have to go and get frying pan number 2, which means you have to take out 4 frying pans, pull out the one you want, and put 4 frying pans back. And then you have to move 5 saucepans to get to the baking dish that you want in the back and pull that out. And then you got to put the 5 saucepans back. And the whole process of seeing a cabinet as a cube to be filled instead of an active work zone to be used is a distinction that really is impacted in the kitchen. So I often say to clients, you need some air in there. You need air around the stuff. You don't need it to be completely that cube that is the cabinet to be 100% full of objects, because then when you want an object that's on the bottom or in the back or anything that isn't exactly on the top in the front, you have to pull a bunch of stuff out to find the one you want and put things back just to get it off the floor or off the counter. Like you can't easily go and get the tool that you want. And so I try to encourage people to think of those spaces as active work zones that you're storing your tools in, and you want to be able to reach down and grab that frying pan and pull it up on top of the stove without having to move anything else and without having to unbuild and rebuild in order to get out the thing that you want. And therefore it can't hold as much as if you jam it all completely full of stuff. And it means that you have to pick your favorites and stage the kitchen as an active work zone for your favorites and not as a storage place for all of the things that you like in the kitchen. And because the kitchen cabinets are generally small and they're not, some of them are on the floor, some of them are way over your head. You don't have a vast quantity. Most houses don't have a huge amount of kitchen storage. And so it becomes a great thinner of the herd in the kitchen. And so I guess the idea that she's describing is storage isn't like a storage unit where you go and drive and put things in the storage unit and fill the cube up and close the door. Storage is just the parking space, the work zone where things are going to go, so that when you pull things out and put them away, there isn't a lot of interference in the removal and put away process. You should be able to just reach in and put the frying pan back where in its parking space that's designated and not have to rebuild the drawer or the cabinet to make it happen. And Gina has her hand up. She's been very patient.
I've had from personal experience that the amount of energy to put something away should be less than the amount of energy it should be to pull it out. I have a bad habit of because after using something, a tool, my energy level has gone down from the beginning of searching for that item. And as a result, I just want to be done. I'm not going to take 20 steps to put one item away. I'm just going to lay it down. So if it's not as easy as pulling open a drawer and dropping it in, or opening up a door and putting it on a shelf, it is not going to happen. You've already expended energy using the tool to do whatever you wanted that tool to do. You don't want to expend even more energy trying to put it away or fit it into a spot. that was already difficult to pull out of to begin with. And that is one thing that I have had to work with, because I'll get spurts of energy. I want to organize and put everything and Tetrasize everything and fill up the space, front, back, top, bottom. But once I need to use that item, I'm like, I don't have the energy to do that Tetris thing again.
I know, right? And sometimes the building of the Tetris is super elaborate, right? Like people go to great lengths to make sure it all fits in there and they can still close the door. And it's like, well, that works as a static cube, but ain't nobody going to be able to rebuild that thing except you. And it's never going to stay like that the minute you want something out of it. And you're right. It's like after you spend an hour in the kitchen using that frying pan and now you've had to clean it, you sure do not want to be fighting to put it away too. Like you're at the end of your resources. You're totally correct. Good. Thank you for that. That's good. Miss Samudras has her hand up.
On the subject of stacks of things, I had to make rules for different kinds of rules for different things. Like I always put the clean dishes on the bottom of the stack so I can go about 6 high, because that's how much I can lift up. When it comes to modular furniture, never more than 2 or at most a little third thing, because I won't take it apart and put it back together. So I had to make those sorts of criteria. But even on the subject of the air around stuff, on the space around stuff, that's the feng shui of it, right? But in this talking about Tetrising it, years ago I was on the phone. An Irish friend who lived in the down neighborhood called me and asked what I was doing. At that moment, I was playing a Tetris sort of a game, the tiles on my computer, and she was cleaning the house and she was objecting. She didn't have any empty corners to move her stuff into so she could get the other stuff. And I was saying, yeah, it's like if I didn't have this empty tile here, I wouldn't be able to, the empty space, I wouldn't be able to get the tiles in order. And I think it's a very apt analogy, and that's all I had to say. Right. But it's nice to have the air breathing around stuff.
You need that. You just need that space for things to be maneuvered without restriction or blocking. Thank you, Samudra. We got lots of people talking. Okay, what's happening, Pat? Pat's next. Pat in Michigan.
Go ahead, Pat. Sorry, I hadn't asked Pat to unmute. Go ahead.
Okay. I have maybe 4 or 5 different colanders or strainers that I use, and I do have room in my cupboards, and they are all stacked, and I most often use like the third one down and get those out and then put them back, and they're easy to put back. I'm curious from Ed's perspective as cooking, what, just one spot for one pan, how that really translates to a real kitchen operation.
I have never yet lived in a place that had enough storage for all of my kitchen stuff. But I think that I would definitely agree with Gayle that I do a sort of a compromise method, which is, the most frequently used things are stacked or nested in a very accessible spot.
In the front, at the top.
Yeah. And certain big infrequently used things have had to be relegated to the basement. Oh gosh, it's a tough question because I have never in my life lived in a place that had enough. Well, and that's not true. When I lived with my parents, there was enough room for all the cooking stuff, and that was the last time. But yeah, I think I'm at a point myself right now where I'm ready to do another round of purging and go through and say, if I haven't used it in 2 years, maybe it needs to go. I probably should be stricter than that and say, if I haven't used it in the last year, it really needs to just go away.
Yeah.
And let me add to, go ahead, Pat, I'm sorry.
I do have a few items that probably haven't been used in 8 or 10 years, but I have a corner cupboard in my kitchen that is not accessible. My stove is in front of it. So that's where I store those things that are like the electric frying pan. That's a family piece. If I ever want to make a certain kind of cookie or some, an oil dipped cookie, a fryer. If I ever want to fry, I still have that frying pan, and it's not in my way because it's in that corner cupboard.
Well, and Pat, I need to say, so if you have 6 colanders and you use number 3 most often, then I would, if I was in your kitchen working with you and you were saying to me, I need all 6 of these colanders, then I would ask you, which ones do you use the most often? And if say number 3 and number 4 in the stack are the ones you use most often, I would take the 4 that you don't use as often and put them farther back in the cabinet and leave the 2 that you do use most often at the front, so that you're grabbing the 2 that get grabbed the most often and they're there without anything on top of them. And the ones that you are saving for, the special occasion or the occasional use, I would put farther back out of the way. So there's more to get to those, but the ones that you grab the most often are the ones that have the least impediment to use.
Okay,
and
good.
I would try to split it that way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Miss Deborah's next.
I was just going to say exactly that. I call it ABCD storage. So, pardon me. when I'm helping somebody declutter, or if I'm looking at my own space, things are things that I need every day. Like there's no way I'm not going to have my coffee making supplies difficult to get out. I mean, nobody would be able to tolerate
everybody needs a coffee in the morning, right?
I wouldn't be able to tolerate me in the morning without coffee. So I have those easily accessible at eye level. B things are things that I use once or twice a week. C things are things that I do use, like my crock pot, which is going right now with chicken stock, that I use maybe once every 2 weeks. And then D storage is things that I have to keep, but I don't need every day, like the past 7 years of taxes. I do not need them in my immediate space.
Exactly.
Because I don't need to gain access to them all the time. So, and that goes for any part of one's home. And so in my kitchen, anything that I use daily stays at the front, and anything that I use less often gets put deeper and deeper, so to speak, into the cabinets and the cupboards. And I find that a useful way to think about things.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's a good description. Okay, Miss Lynn is next.
Hi. This leaving things out, I do things with a wake behind me of all the things I got out. If I get something out of my purse, then my wallet is left out. And then if I'm cooking, I get a spice down, everything is left out. And if I needed to say, hey, I would need to change. I need to change my habit of not being aware and focusing. And after I do something, follow through with it right away, because I would leave things out, wrap a package, all the ribbon papers are out, cook a meal, everything's left out. So now I'm focusing as I do something, if I get it out, I put it away. Get it out, I put it away. One thing, a habit is turning the security light off. I'd actually put a string across the kitchen so that when I came out in the morning, I would come into the string so I would remember to turn the security light off. These are changing habits for me.
Yeah. And it is considering completion. Like what you're describing is completing the loop of, I took the wrapping paper out, I wrapped the present. So that's step 1, which is I accomplished the action I needed, but now I need to clean up behind myself. And that completion process gets ignored a lot. And so it's great that you've recognized that, and that you are trying to add the habit in of going back behind. And so for people that find that difficult, it's just a matter of maybe you do it as you like you said, I pull it out, I put it back and try to concentrate on that. Maybe it's I finish my cooking and then I go back, and the secondary process is I clean up the kitchen. Like I got to go put everything away. And you've had the habit of doing the task to accomplish what you want, which is to make dinner, and then stopping at the end of that. And now you can circle back and say, okay, but I do actually have to clean the kitchen if I ever want to do this again, find this spice and, not live in a pile of dirty dishes. And so there is that circling back to close the loop thing that a lot of people find hard and need reminding and concentrating on to help them accomplish it. So good on you for your working on it. That's great. And I'm sure it makes a difference for you.
Very much so.
Thank you. Genevieve.
Hello.
Hi.
So I'm a taller person and my kitchen is pretty small. So like if I'm going into a lower cabinet,
you have to stand on your head.
Yeah. I just want to say, like, having to crouch down or bend over to look in there because I can't like stand far away enough to see inside does not spark joy.
Right? It is annoying as hell, is what you're saying.
It really makes me want to find an alternative and maybe just not use those lower cabinets at all.
So one of the things you can do is you can think of lower cabinets as your long-term storage for the things you don't need to get out very often. Like, don't use those lower cabinets because you can reach up higher than the average person, and you can use upper cabinets for active spaces that maybe somebody who's 5'3" can't use, right? Yeah, like you can go up there. And then you can also consider, you can install roll-out shelves that, you put little screws into, like 4 screws in to put down the track. And then you can have a drawer basically that slides out from a cabinet that is too low. And you lose some of the capacity of the cabinet, but that's fine because you don't want to bend over and stick your head in there anyway. So maybe you just put a slide out drawer in there that allows you to have some use of it and not have to be, standing on your head.
That's a good
or,
idea.
I find myself clearing out by, like, I go in people's closet cabinets to clear them, and I end up laying on the floor and sticking my head and my arm into the cabinet to pull stuff out. And it's like, well, this is not a practical everyday process, right? Like, you can't do that. So
it's just the pots and pans. That's like the other cabinet, the other lower cabinet. I don't put stuff in there that I use very often. And we are taller, so we will use the space on top of the kitchen cabinets where a lot of people will put decorations and plants. Like, no, we put stuff up there that we use.
Yeah. If you can reach it, that's the perfect thing to do because it totally goes with your height. Exactly. Yeah. And then you can also look at racking things on the wall.
Right.
Because you're tall. And so if you run something up the wall or have a pot rack over your head, it's easy for you to grab it where somebody that's 5'2" is going to find that more of a problem.
Yeah.
Work with your height and accommodate, create storage and solutions that work with the fact that you're wonderfully tall and you can reach things other people can't.
I just think it was kind of interesting to have that moment where I'm like, hey, this action does not spark joy. How can we change or eliminate this action that I'm having to do? You know what I mean?
Right. And the action of bending over and trying to look in is super annoying. I get it.
Hands, yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
It's clear that we could have had 6 Marie Kondo episodes, but we're not going to. We're going to try it. We're going to wrap it up today, one way or another.
Right.
So let's go to, we're not going to get through all of our quotes and questions. So let's just do number 9, Gayle.
Okay.
I'll read the quote.
Okay.
Tidying is just a tool, not the final destination. The true goal should be to establish the lifestyle you want most once your house has been put in order. And our survey respondents pretty overwhelmingly agreed with that to one extent or another. We got like 1 vote each at the lower end of the range of values, and most people were bunched up near the top. And we asked people to elaborate on their answers, and several of them repeated back our own tagline to us: clear your clutter, love your life. Thank you. We're glad you have been paying attention.
You've been paying attention to our branding. Thank you so much.
One of our respondents said, I joke that decluttering, podcasts, books, actually discarding items is my hobby. In reality, having fewer items allows more room in my life for other things, some tangible, some not. It's Econ 101. Money not spent on X junk is money available for Y adventure. There is certainly peace knowing where things are.
That's great. That's a good comment. There is definitely peace to knowing where things are and recognizing that you have enough, you're not without, and you can do great things even without 300,000 items in your space. That's a shocking number, isn't it?
Right. 300,000. I know. I need to take a look at that.
It's like, oh, that's really shocking.
Someone shared a link to the source of that. And
oh, cool.
I need to find that and share it.
We should go check it out.
I think we should talk about next week.
Okay. So I just want to say that I really appreciate everybody's participation over the last 3 weeks. You've been so great about getting into the survey and answering it or participating in the live webcast. And it's made a really great, lively conversation about the process of how organizing affects your life. And so we hope it's giving you some insight into what is a disincentive to the organizing process and what motivates you to get into the process. And actually, YouTube viewer Linda shared this comment that I think sums up the last 3 weeks discussion perfectly. So I wanted to read it to you guys. Linda says, it feels like we all need to recognize that each of us has an organizing personality, and it's okay to lean into the ways that do work for us and let the rest go. It's all about our context, and that changes day to day and week to week. I think that's very well said, Linda. Thank you. And that makes a great segue into this week's Tittle, which is playing favorites. The overwhelming majority of audience members who reported trying the Marie Kondo method told us that they use it in combination with other organizing strategies and techniques. So the assignment this week is to identify and apply your favorite technique from Marie Kondo or any other organizing expert. And you want to first write down your favorite or most effective technique or strategy, and then choose a project, a category of stuff, an area of your home that's been trying to get your attention lately, and make a plan to get to work on that project area you've selected and schedule one or more appointments this week. And then let us know how it goes. Let us see how you get back to, we've been spending a whole bunch of time talking about the process in theory. And so let's go into practice and work on an area and then come back and tell us how it went. And we will look forward to seeing you then.
Okay. We are about out of time. I want to remind everyone that we'll be back next week, Tuesday, July 5th at our usual time, noon US Central Time, live in Zoom and streaming on Facebook. And we're going to talk on the theme of summertime and the living is easy, or at least we hope so. Some of us have, some of us are dealing with heat, so we don't want to be outside, so we're hiding in the air conditioning. And some of us don't have the budget for fabulous vacations, so we're planning staycations. So we're going to return to hobby spaces and art and craft rooms next week. We've talked about this a few times, but there's a lot more to say about it. And we know that many members of our audience are artists or crafts people or enthusiastic hobbyists. So we'll be back with that topic next week. I did want to make one other unplanned announcement, which is to say, we want to kind of get your feedback on how you how you have enjoyed the format these 3 weeks, because we're thinking we may try to incorporate more surveys and more interaction with our participants. When we started Zoom meetings in 2019, we found that many people were reluctant to participate. And so we kind of planned to carry most of the conversation ourselves and not rely on audience participation. But I think 3 years—
Clearly y'all have gotten over it.
In 3 years, a lot of people have gotten the hang of Zoom. And we also have an audience of a lot of people who are with us every week who enjoy participating. So I'd just love to get your feedback informally. If you go to our website and use the contact form, drop us a note to say, I like this, I don't like this, I would rather you do that. Just to, anyone who feels strongly one way or the other about how these last 3 weeks have gone. We'd love to hear from you. If you're watching this on YouTube, we would love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. We heard from a participant today that we have passed that 3,000 member mark. Woohoo! You can also follow us on Facebook by visiting cfhou.com/Facebook, or subscribe to our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe. We love to hear from you, so please send us your comments, questions, and topic suggestions on YouTube, Facebook, or through our website at clutterfairyhouston.com. And we hope to hear from you.
I really appreciate that everybody participates, and we are so happy that you join us. We have such a good time with you, and we will be back next week. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.